This is something eerie and, and unsettling about the kind of art that Tarsem Singh makes. And this one has proved to be particularly indelible, even as his first movie. And I was just reminded of that with the shots like this. This guy was the master of the music video helicopter fly-in shot. And for some reason, he's the kind of filmmaker who is like, you know what, how I'm going to open my film? I'm going to take Jennifer Lopez out into the Sahara, find the biggest fucking dune I can, put her in a white dress on a black horse, have her walk across that fucking thing and shoot it with a helicopter with the widest, lens that I can. And that is why I love this dude. And at the same time, when you think about when this movie was made, it's like 1999. This movie was talked about in that book, the best movie year ever. Because it was just part of that year where the question was like, yeah, how can we, mess with reality? How can we penetrate the human brain and like really figure out what's going on inside somebody? It was just a really heady year, and it fits in really well amongst its peers like The Matrix and Fight Club and all the rest. But what makes this one, I guess, now that I watch it again, really stand out is it had a bravery. It has a very bizarre premise, and it kind of fearlessly just marches forward with it, and the actors are all just taking it seriously. They handle it with aplomb, and the way that it's photographed, the way that the camera moves, it just wasn't something too many people were doing in the era.
Are you really mansplaining money laundering to me?
Welcome to Theater and Stream, a film podcast. I am Matt, and that is Chuck, and this is episode 19. As the calendar turns over to August, and the summer movie leftovers fight for box office scraps from Barbenheimer, Chuck and I thought it'd be a good time for another director retrospective. This month, we'll be looking at the brief yet impactful filmography of Indian surrealist Tarsem. Naturally, we're going to start with his debut feature today, the turn of the millennium Jennifer Lopez vehicle, The Cell. But it's not going to be all about the past today. We're still going to bring you the latest news from the front lines of the strike. We're still going to be talking about the more topical shows that we've been watching. And we're still bringing it all home with the Mentionables. Consider subbing if you like what you see and hear. You're going to find timestamps in the description below. And before we get into the meat of the show, I need to send an on-air congratulations to Chuck's direction. Chuck, congrats on the birth of your child. And I gotta ask, as a first-time father, do you suddenly have the urge to brew your own beer and watch the filmography of Peter Weir?
I already had all those impulses. So nothing much has changed in that regard. No, it's I will say, yesterday morning, the first thing that we did, like at the crack of dawn when I was up feeding him, I went on to Peacock and I saw that they had Baywatch. And I was like, all right, time for him to get some peak 90s entertainment. And then we followed that up with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the original season, that first 6 runs of episodes.
Oh yeah.
So I am leaning fully into what I'm gonna let this kid be exposed to. In the hospital, I put on the TV edit of Goodfellas because that's the kind of dad.
Okay.
That's the kind of dad I am. But we kind of with new life coming in, I just want to say shout out to Angie, my wife. She's been a trooper, and we're very happy to have the little man here, Luca Michael Crane. And yes, the movie did have a lot to picking out the name, but so does The Godfather. Luca Brasi is a meme within my family, and like he's a meme of cinema. And yeah, now my parents will laugh every time they think of their grandson because all they can think of is, "May your child be a masculine child," because.
Yeah.
But there's some sadness though this week because we found out that our good friend, Pee Wee Herman himself, Paul Ruebens, had a private battle with cancer and succumbed to, his condition, sometime on July 30th. And this was a hard one to hear. This one sucked.
Mm-hmm.
It came out of nowhere, and he's just one of those dudes that even when he was gone, Pee Wee still resonated throughout the years in terms of like his career fizzling out. Like after the unfortunate incident in that theater, you really didn't see him. But even like our generation, like and even beyond that, like Pee Wee Herman still stuck around in the zeitgeist. And why would you think that is?
I think it's pretty timeless humor, I think. It's sort of that silly mix of like slapstick and just, I don't know, like just like weird noises, and a lot of it isn't very topical stuff, so it transcends the decades. And of course, like Pee-wee's Big Adventure is actually, in addition to being funny, it's actually a good movie. As sort of one of those early Tim Burton films, it's actually a good film on top of being funny. And so I think that, that's probably what he's most remembered for, and I think he will be most remembered for. But I did also want to give a shout out to his more serious roles, because there was a couple times in his life where Paul Ruebens was able to kind of like pull a Robin Williams and do like a serious role. And I remember he was in Blow.
Yep.
The movie Blow in the 2000s, early 2000s. He was in the Todd Solondz movie Life During Wartime.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. And then of course he played the Penguin's father in Batman Returns. So but yeah, just
pretty iconically and memorably, even though he like doesn't have a spoken line.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I just wanted to give the shout out to those because I think that he did. I mean, even some of his comedic roles that weren't as like slapsticky, like in Mystery Men. Do you remember Mystery Men? Yeah. He was great in that. So, yeah, I just wanted to shout out the more serious things. Is there anything in particular that you think of other than Pee-wee?
Like as you mentioned, Blow, but that's the kind of the thing. He kind of became a chameleon later in his career, and unless there's a lot I need to seek out apparently. Like because I'm woefully after Happiness, I couldn't handle Todd Solondz anymore. So I did not watch Life During Wartime, but now I might have a reason because this kind of blends with my mentioning of Baywatch because Hasselhoff and Ruebens went to the same high school and like we were in like college together too, and we're acting buddies, and that's just kind of a neat pairing when you think about when they both ascended and what their careers were like and just the differences between them as individuals. But they were like bros, and I just want to hold that up and highlight that, because it says a lot about the actual fraternity of thespians and the people who hustle in Hollywood and rise and fall and suffer and die in obscurity. But those two guys were somehow able to become, at least I'd say Reubens more than Hasselhoff, maybe. I don't know. Yeah. That's a different argument for another time. But we salute you,
well,
sir.
I think that, yeah, and the last thing I wanted to mention is I'm always fascinated by, you put up his statement that was posthumously released on his like Instagram, where he basically said, sorry for, not divulging that I've been battling cancer, which is, sort of a crazy thing to say because, deal with it however you want. But I'm always fascinated by like when actors or famous people have like the wherewithal or like they still have the state of mind to like know that they're going to die soon, but they still have like the state of mine to like release something like a statement or like a video or something like that.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of have you ever seen the Christopher Lee video that he like put on YouTube like
No.
right before he died? Oh man. I was just reminded of that. Pee-wee's or Paul Ruebens' statement reminded me of that. And it's something that people should go seek out because Christopher Lee knew that he was dying and he put up this video on YouTube on his YouTube channel that was basically, and it's still up, and he basically was like, my friends, my family, my admirers, whatever, we have reached the end. Like this is the end, and I'm glad to have lived this life and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was reminded of that.
It calls to mind Norm Macdonald's final special too. That was a very strange experience, but yeah, the wherewithal and like the awareness to be like, well, time to do something, and like like while I still can't articulate it, oofta, yeah, because the things can be taken from you in an instant. Just ask the writers and actors of Hollywood. We've been talking about this, what do you call it? This strike. This action taken by these guild outfits against the producers alliance, and Chris Gore over at Film Threat, an elder statesman of internet punditry, has a theory in a video that's titled like what the strike is really about, and what he's basically proposing is that even in victory, these people are only fucking themselves over and kind of like giving up the game here. It's all like, I'm just reminded of that scene in Wolf of Wall Street where McConaughey tells DiCaprio it's all just fugazi, it's pixie dust. It's all just made up. Because what if they finally get an honest accounting of what their compensation should be? Because these these streaming platforms are black boxes. They just say, oh yeah, just trust us, these are the numbers. So if there's if it becomes more transparent, what if we get bad news? What if we find out that there's a reason why you're making pennies? It's because no one watches your shit, and they're all watching reality TV and Seinfeld and Friends and The Office for the millionth time. Like how do they reckon with that once the wool is pulled away and the shadows aren't on the cave wall anymore, and we all find out that all this drivel isn't worth anything?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the idea behind it is that the streamers, they keep all their viewership numbers secret because it keeps their stock price high. And the idea is that should they reveal all these numbers, or should they be made to reveal all these numbers by like a law or something like that, that their stocks will just tumble. And then that would lead to, all of these people who are striking right now being out of the jobs, not because they're striking, but because the companies literally can't afford to hire them anymore. Mm-hmm. And so it's a good point, I think. And something that could very well happen. I think it is really shady that the streamers don't release the numbers, and that's probably exactly why. And we even before the strikes happen, we on this show, we've been ringing this bell for ever since last winter when we were talking about Disney, and I think the way that we had termed it was the tightening of the belt of the industry is what we called it. And I think this needs to happen, and this might be part of that. And we need to get back to a status quo, because all of this money has flooded into Hollywood ever since everybody got a streaming service, and they're just like green light, green light, green light, green light, green light. And we need to get back to like a more tenable status quo. And I'm reminded of the video game industry here, where last year, the company Sony, they greenlit 12 games as a service video games, which are basically, if people don't know, they're games like Fortnite. And They greenlit 12 of those, 12 first-party games as a service games. And the reason why they did that is because if you have one game that is successful as Fortnite, it makes all the others worth it. Even if out of those 12 games, 11 of them crash and burn and get canceled or get closed down right away. If you get one Fortnite, it makes it all worth it. And that's what is happening here. It's everybody just like, we need a streaming service, we need a streaming service, we need a streaming service, because if we're the one person that makes the Netflix success story, it'll all be worth it.
It'll all be okay. It's the same problem in theaters themselves too, where like we just need $1 billion movie and everything's okay, right? Well, what happens when you line up 4 would-be billion-dollar movies and they all tank? Like Disney's experiencing right now. Like there's a wealth of things we could dig into, especially in the aftermath of Barbenheimer. But as far as streaming goes, that is what's kind of happening too. You needed all these things to be sure bet winners, and potentially Paramount could cease to be, partially because of their streaming platform being so listless and, they're not really bringing in any numbers relative to what it would require them to sustain themselves. Their Star Trek content isn't enough. And look who's waiting in the wings to gobble them up. It's people like, Netflix and Apple and Amazon, who are the ones with the other revenue streams, outside of cinema that are bankrolling all of this stuff. Like, once we get into these omni corporations running like Hollywood, completely, then we're really, and even though we kind of have, I know, but it's really going to get wild. And that's why, like, you really hope that the people who make this stuff get some concessions that are, like genuinely commensurate, but you gotta be giving us a product that's worth it in the first place. Otherwise, you deserve to fail. There's a reason why Quibi died. And like, what would happen if something as big, because like, what if Peacock or Paramount or whatever, like, I guess AMC is a subsidiary now. Like, it had to be saved. It couldn't exist on its own. But like TNT doesn't exist anymore. Like, I don't know. Like there was way too many apps is what happened. And all of them are either latching on to something parasitically or they are just going to be going away eventually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's, you bring up a good point about whether or not, the writers really truly deserve to be getting this money that they're asking for. And I just think that, unfortunately, there needs to be less of them in Hollywood because, as I said earlier, when the streaming boom happened, there's so many people, I think, flooded into Hollywood with their scripts and with their acting talent or whatever. And I just think that, there's not enough room for all these people. And I would rather get less TV shows. I think there's way too many TV shows right now. I would rather get less TV shows and less, greenlight less stuff, make less stuff, and pay the people that are making the good stuff more. Pay those people more and just send everybody back home packing to their flyover states.
Because guess what happens when you do that? Like, once Hollywood has a proper diaspora, because like I watched La La Land while I was feeding the other day with Angie, and like once all of the Emma Stones go back home to the hinterlands because they couldn't get anyone to go to their one-man show, guess what happens? There's an opportunity for a genuine, organic, quote-unquote, decentralized filmmaking boom, which is this hip new rebranding that they've christened independent film with. Because, if there's genuinely a farm league in entertainment like there are in sports leagues, which is genuinely how this works, because the reason why these positions command so much desire from people, writing on a TV show, being on a professional sports team, what have you, it's because there's so few of those positions available. And to actually get one requires something elite of you, to have something better than all the rest who are gunning for that number one spot as well. And yeah, there were just far too many opportunities within Hollywood commanding far too many dollars. And guess what needs to happen instead? It's like there needs to be some kind of, diversion of talent and energy and resources outside of the Hollywood system. I find it so funny that people like Mark Ruffalo are like, come on guys, let's just go do this. We can just go full independent. Fuck Hollywood. Let's build something new. It's like, asshole, you were there in the 90s. You were a part of this. Like you act like you've come up with some brilliant idea. You fucking sold out like all the rest of them because the money was fucking good and the jobs were there. So I don't know. Like, I think there just needs to be some more sincerity from some of these people. If they really wanted to fuck Hollywood, yeah, all these people would be out making non-union illegal films, basically, and then finding, like, make your Dr. Sing-Along vlogs, please. Bring us all of your fun little side projects. Give us something real instead of just all this performative bullshit.
Yeah. Oh, Mark Ruffalo has been hilarious because have you seen the pictures of him on the picket lines where he's like basically cosplaying as like a poor person?
Yeah.
Where he's like you can tell that he like told his assistant or whatever to go out to like Old Navy and like pick him up some clothes so that he wasn't showing up to like the picket line wearing like Tom Ford or whatever. And it's so funny. You can just tell it's a very calculated way that he chose to dress to go picket. And yeah, it's pretty funny. But yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens. Have you by chance seen the TV channels are releasing their like fall TV schedules now? And have you by chance seen any of those?
I haven't, but I've been thinking about that. Is it pretty thin?
Yeah, it's thin. And what they're doing, I mean, they're starting to get creative. I mean, what's happening is a lot of cable TV channels, they're filling out their fall TV schedule with shows from other countries. Like, they're buying the rights to, stuff like, I know that CBS is going to televise the UK version of the show Ghosts, even though they already made the US version. And so they're doing that. And then they're also taking stuff from their streaming services and they're putting them on cable now. Like they're going to show the Harrison Ford Yellowstone prequel. They're going to put that on cable TV now.
That's
and they're
smart.
So
because there's some of these people in that audience who don't fuck with streaming. But they've siloed some shows that they would definitely watch outside of their reach. I think this is something we're going to see more of going forward no matter what. Just as a power play against certain, productions and guilds and whatnot. It's like, oh, you want to hang on to your primetime broadcast slot? Well, you better keep delivering a good show because they might put like a special TV, movie from some streaming show on broadcast TV instead. They create the scarcity. They take something from streaming and they put it somewhere only the broadcast audience can get it. And suddenly people have a reason. Like, what if Netflix made a deal with ABC to put like the Stranger Things finale episode only on live television? How many people would tune in for that?
Yeah, a year ago, I probably would have said that would never happen. But yes, I think that is a very distinct possibility now.
That's interesting. Okay, take that, Hollywood. Find a way to make this into a product, commodify these ideas, because we wind up with some brilliant things sometimes as we transition into. Because I'm just gonna skip that Zaslav thing. He's just flexing. He's just because he just makes the comments about how we're saving so much fucking money by having this strike going on right now. We're actually really grateful that they're doing this to us. So I think that says everything. Like the guy is a Trumpian asshole of the highest order, and salute to you, sir. But without the streaming boom, we wouldn't have people going, you know what we should do? That PlayStation game where there's like a clown head on fire and you just like drive around in cars blowing each other up? That'd make a great TV show. Make it happen. Here's $60 million. Like get a pilot, and we wind up with this Twisted Metal. Somehow, this is like not a well-made show. It's deliberately chintzy. It's really badly acted. The writing is hokey. Everything about it is just cringe. But like all of these like negative things I'm saying are all in a good way. It knows what it is. Every actor in this knows what they're doing. Like everyone sat down to make this and said, "What if we made the anti The Last of Us?" The video game apocalypse show that was fun, light, gory, ridiculous, and endearing, and at the same time sweet and sincere. Like I made a joke on Facebook, but the relationship between Anthony Mackie's character John Doe and his car Evelyn is a better love story than episode 4 of season 1 of The Last of Us. It's better than Twilight. It like brought a tear to my eye. And everything about this is like they just like you just watch this and they're like, well, where are we gonna try really hard? We're gonna try really hard in like actually making like characters that are at least if not relatable, or at least like commenting on the genre. There's a lot of substance to this. And the plot is like thin. I never really played the game, so I don't know if this universe is wholly original to Reese and Warnick, the writing duo who kind of like wrote the Bible for this. But it just has an awesome sensibility. Like it does things in the apocalypse where it's like, oh yeah, we have all these fun different gangs and tribes, and they all have their own gimmicks. And they're often, like unique, or at least, it's just like, oh yeah, it's one of those things. And they always find a good actor to play them. Like Jason Mantzoukas shows up as like this cult leader of like a dominatrix, like submissive biker gang. It's a weird situation, but like at some moments you're like, wow, this looks like a high production value, lots of special effects, action video game show. And then in the next moment you're like, wow, this seems like a complete like this thing came from The League. Like it has that level of production value. The lighting is just bad and the acting is bad, but like it all works. Everything about this works. It shouldn't. It should not. I should not have enjoyed this. I should have hated it. Like the way that Anthony Mackie delivers his lines is borderline annoying, but you can just tell that every affectation is a conscious choice. And I am here for season 2, because that's when it actually becomes the game where it's like, oh yeah, we're gonna get all the best drivers from around the country. We're gonna make them go head to head. And and there's this guy Calypso that's gonna run it. Like that's what made it work. All of the window dressing, all the references to the games are pretty much just a setup. They're just kind of in the background, and it's finally becoming what the first game presumably is in the second season of the show. But I really fucking liked it, and I'm ready for more.
So would you say that, because I'm a person who's always like, I think Peacock is like one of the worst streaming services out there as far as like selection and what you're even paying for. So would you say this is like, is this worth it to like sub to it for like a month or something?
For like a month, get yourself a free trial, try this thing out. I don't know, like Peacock has been drawing me in. They get me to watch things like Mrs. Davis. Well, they don't, but they don't genuinely like get me to finish shows more often. But they got our household pretty good this week. I'll be talking about another Peacock show later, but they're batting pretty good. They are making better selections in terms of what they want to have on there. And as long, I don't know, like this show would have been worse on any other platform, because it made a very deliberate choice, and it adhered to it, and it's part of its charm. And I think this is why it's worth watching. Like, I guess is because they do this thing where the world ended in 2003 and everything went to shit. 20 years later, here we are. This is where the world is at. But guess what's not in this series at all? Any culture war bullshit. Any any throwaway lines that just make you cringe because you can just feel a person in the present talking for the person in the past, and that just isn't present here. People talk like people did in the 90s or in like the early 2000s, and you really can't say that about The Last of Us. But now that I think about it, it's like, wow, yeah, like they actually did a good job of just making these people sound like cartoon characters from another era without making them sound like the present, and that is a choice that I respect a great deal.
Sure. Yeah.
So yeah, throw it a sub. But if I'm wrong, if it's not up to your sense, because it's gory, it gets really stupid. But
Okay.
that's why I liked it. But what can you tell me about something more highbrow, Matt? Idris Elba could have stopped 9/11. Is that the message?
Yeah, I wouldn't call this exactly highbrow. This is Hijack on
Okay.
Apple TV Plus. This is from Jeff Field Smith and George K, and they both worked on the Netflix show Lupin, which
Oh yeah.
was a pretty good show. I really, really liked that show, and we've just been waiting for a second season on that for like 3 years. But this is kind of what they've done in the interim, and this is a show, very simple premise. A plane that is going from Dubai to London is hijacked by, I guess, terrorists, English terrorists. I really don't know yet. I'm only a couple episodes in, but Idris Elba is the show's protagonist, and he's a mysterious guy where, he gets on the plane, and the only carry-on luggage he has, he doesn't have a briefcase, he doesn't have a backpack, he doesn't have a suitcase or anything. He just has a little paper bag that you come to find out has a Gucci bracelet in it. Just one Gucci bracelet, and so you're wondering, okay, this guy's kind of weird. He has nothing on him, and what is he doing? Why is he here? And you come to find that out, but this is a pretty decent show. It could be a very tired premise. It could be a very generic premise, but it's executed very well. And they do a good job of giving all the other passengers on the airplane sort of their mini character arcs and their sort of archetypes, because this is a full plane full of over 100 people, and they do a good job of giving at least a third of those people some sort of character trait, or some sort of trait, like these are the guys who are going to try and be heroes and overpower the terrorist, and here's the family that has the the annoying children who are crying throughout the plane ride, and here's the woman who is like a Instagram influencer, and so they give everybody their little character beats, and it's all very, very well drawn. And but the thing that got me hooked is that, and I guess this could be considered a spoiler, but it happens at the tail end of episode 1, so it's really not that big of a spoiler. But you come to find out that Idris Elba's character is, for his job, what he does is he goes all around the world, and he is basically like a broker, negotiator for companies that are merging or acquiring each other.
Oh yeah, okay.
And so he's basically like a middleman for like companies that are merging. And so you find out that he's going to be the guy that is going to, he's going to stop the terrorists by like basically negotiating with them, being the negotiator. And it's a pretty good hook. And I'm full in on this now.
That is a good hook. That's interesting. Yeah. I'm going to have to reconsider my Apple TV Plus abstinence with all the good stuff they have going on, because new shows with good hooks are kind of like what's been working for me personally lately too. I didn't think that I was gonna be into this, but I just threw it on because it was on Peacock. I just finished Twisted Metal, just watched Baywatch. What else was there? Well, there was something called Based on a True Story, starring Kaylee Cuoco and Chris Messina, Natalia Dyer, amongst others. But the premise is this former washed up tennis guy. He was a professional person. He beat Federer once. Then he tore up his knee, and then he was a tennis pro at some club in Calabasas, or something like that. And his wife is pregnant. She's a realtor. Being a realtor sucks. Anytime a character in a TV show is a realtor, they're going to be fucking miserable. And so, yeah, what do they have to look forward to every night? It's, him on the shitter watching highlights of his career, and her, with her phone listening to a murder podcast. That is the highlight of their lives. And what that ends up happening to them is they have plumbing problems. So they hire a plumber. And this plumber is just like way too nice, way too ingratiating. There's just something strange about the dude. But he and the husband like become friends and like go out and about together. And what they eventually come to find out is that a bartender that they both had interacted with is murdered the next morning. And basically, though, the wife and him figure out that, oh shit, our plumber is this serial killer, the West Side Ripper, who's just been, killing women left and right in our neighborhood. And then they're like, okay, we have money troubles. We're both like miserable in our job situations. We're having midlife crises left and right, as men and women are often, you do. Her friends are all telling her to just have an affair because that's what made their lives better. And he's just sitting there getting drunk with a much younger guy, longing for the better years. And then they realize, wait a minute, we could leverage this. And the hook to this show is, instead of calling the cops, instead of trying to put an end to the madness, they like get him alone and confront him and basically be like, hey, take part in this podcast recording we're going to do, or we'll tell the police. And then what happens because they do that? And I haven't finished the show. Angie's pretty close to finishing it, but I'm going to see this one through to the end because it reminds me of things like the Santa Clarita Diet, just that kind of vibe where it's light, it's very satirical without going overboard, and there's just kind of a bite to this, that a menace that I really enjoy. And I would even recommend it. You get more out of these actors than I would expect. Chris Messina does a good job, but Kaylee Cuoco is giving us a lot more than I've ever seen. Because, I don't know, I haven't seen her much outside of The Big Bang Theory. But yeah, I'll take this.
So it's funny then, or it's like darkly funny. Yeah, because it's kind of hard to get the vibe from like the trailer, but yeah, it is. It's sort of like a black humor type thing.
Yeah,
dark humor.
It's poking fun at a lot of the different things out in the culture right now, and you just have these two characters who, like, this husband and wife who like don't love each other anymore, and they have basically said as much to each other, and then they find something that they both can invest in again. So it's kind of like funny in that way, because like as they build up this conspiracy, they're also reforging their relationship at the same time, putting it in peril. So they're just like walking a knife of, well, is this going to work out? Or are they both going to wind up dead or divorced? Like which is going to be worse? And then, we got a quick hit here from you. A show that I abandoned in season 2. Do I need to dive back in to the Righteous Gemstones?
Yeah, I would say so. This show, it seems like it comes and goes. I mean, it's very, very like, I think there was like 2 years between season 1 and 2, and now there's been like a year and a half between 2 and 3, and so it doesn't come very often, but I think that for me, season 2 was also a bit of a misfire overall, and I don't know, it just took itself too seriously. I don't know if like Danny McBride and David Gordon Green were on that like Halloween high where they were like, oh, we're serious filmmakers now,
this is Succession.
We're gonna inject a bunch of pathos into this show and take it way too seriously, and that's kind of what happened with season 2, where it got way too plot heavy, and it got like strangely serious at times. And luckily with this third season, which is all available now, all the episodes are out now, it's back to just being pretty light, funny, very, very plot light, and just like being a complete awesome satire of like these mega churches in like the South. And yeah, I think this show has refound its footing with this third season. And yeah, it's more in line with like Eastbound and Down and some of their, David Gordon Green and Danny McBride's older stuff, rather than them trying to sort of punch above their weight class. And yeah, really, really great. And this show always has really, really good guest stars. And I wanted to shout out this season, the sort of plot, the main thrust of the plot, if you could call it that, is that Shea Wiggum shows up as a retired NASCAR driver that the Gemstones are trying to convince to endorse their church, because if they can get a NASCAR driver to like basically endorse their church, they'll just get like, X number of new parishioners. And then at the same time, Stephen Dorff shows up as a rival mega church pastor who's also trying to get Shea Wiggum to come to his church. And so I guess that's sort of the main thrust of the plot. It's nice, it's light, it's breezy, it's not as self-serious as season 2 was. And yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. I watched the entire season, and yeah, I think the show has refound its footing, and it just got renewed for a 4th season, which will probably won't come out till like 2025. But
because these guys are busy. But I'm glad that you were able to report good news such as this, because that was basically my problem with it. Because like, it's not that I didn't like Barry, but I didn't want this show to be Barry, and it kind of seemed they were like emulating the direction that show took, in terms of being less of a comedy and more of a really tragic drama when you get right down to it. Because these people are despicable, and we're supposed to be hating them and laughing at them. It's not everybody can be Succession either, which is funny, but like only in like a dry and like depressing kind of way. Like if you're laughing, it's in agony over how horrible whatever it is you're laughing at is. And
exactly.
Yeah, and instead laugh at just how stupid and silly it is, because like that's what the first season of this show was. That was its charm to me. So I have the time. I'm sitting here with nothing but time, as long as I can keep my eyeballs open. And it was hard work keeping my eyeballs open last night, not because of the movie that we're talking about here, but because I just had to put off watching it so long this week. But Tarsem is just one of those filmmakers who I knew that this guy was special from the moment I ever saw a frame of this movie, which, if I remember exactly, was in a promo trailer on some VHS tape we rented from the local C-store. And it was one of those, trailers that made my parents reach to cover my eyes, even though I was like 10 years old, because, it's Jennifer Lopez in a weird skin-tight suit, like there's something dangerous obviously going on. But there just is something eerie and, and unsettling about the kind of art that Tarsem makes. And this one has proved to be particularly indelible, even as his first movie. And I was just reminded of that with the shots like this. This guy was the master of the music video helicopter fly-in shot. And for some reason, he's the kind of filmmaker who is like, you know what, how I'm going to open my film? I'm going to take Jennifer Lopez out into the Sahara, find the biggest fucking dune I can, put her in a white dress on a black horse, have her walk across that fucking thing and shoot it with a helicopter with the widest lens that I can. And that is why I love this dude. And at the same time, when you think about when this movie was made, it's like 1999. This movie was talked about in that book, the best movie year ever. Because it was just part of that year where the question was like, how can we mess with reality? How can we penetrate the human brain and like really figure out what's going on inside somebody? It was just a really heady year, and it fits in really well amongst its peers like The Matrix and Fight Club and all the rest. But what like makes this one, I guess, like now that I watch it again, really stand out is it had a bravery. It has a very bizarre premise. And it kind of fearlessly just marches forward with it, and the actors are all just taking it seriously. They handle it with aplomb. And the way that it's photographed, the way that the camera moves, it just wasn't something too many people were doing in the era. And I don't know, as far as introducing this movie, I don't know if I can do it anymore without babbling, because I'm much more familiar with the back end of his filmography, but this movie has been a part of my cinematic landscape, no matter what, just because of just how crazy its imagery is, and ultimately how powerful its final sweeping moments are emotionally. And yeah, people, fucking watch this movie again. Matt, what do you got to say about it?
Yeah, I gotta confess here that I don't think I've ever actually seen The Cell like all the way through
Yeah,
in its unedited form,
same.
because when this movie came out, I was of, the age, I would have been 11. And so I was of the age that this was a dangerous movie. This was like, mixing an 11-year-old mind with some of the imagery in this movie, it cannot make for a good recipe. And I seem to remember trying to watch it and just being too weirded out.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I have seen the movie in an edited form, like on, I think maybe like Sci-Fi Channel, in like, when I was a little bit older. But this is the first time, I actually sat down and watched the whole thing. And you kind of come to realize how much of the film is actually, edited out of those TV edits. Like, this is a pretty fucked up movie,
Yeah.
and I wasn't, prepared for that. And I think I'm really surprised it actually got an R rating at some points. And um, yeah, I was just trying to put myself back in that mindset of like a person who saw this when it came out. And if people don't remember, there was sort of two narratives going on when this movie came out. Number one was that this was a ripoff of The Matrix, because I
Hmm.
think, people were trying to grasp for comparisons. And so people thought that, and that's a bit of a flippant comparison. But then people were also saying that this was one of those movies. This is the part people don't remember, is that this was one of those movies that two studios had competing like movies coming out at the same time that were very similar, like Deep Impact and Armageddon. And in this movie's case, it was the um, Robert Downey Jr. Annette Bening vehicle In Dreams. And
Okay.
I'm sure a lot of people don't even remember that movie, but it had a very similar premise to this. And unfortunately, it came out before this one did, so it kind of stole this movie's thunder a bit. And that's kind of where we find ourselves, I think, with the movie today, because it's sort of that one that's forgotten about in Tarsem's filmography, I think. And yeah, it's um, I think if this guy would have been if his career would have started just a decade later, he would have been so much bigger than he is now.
Yeah.
He would have been in the same leagues as, like, he reminds me a lot of Guillermo del Toro, in that they both made really strange movies, but del Toro had the advantage of, releasing, I think Pan's Labyrinth came out in 2007, I believe. And so people were more open to having these weird visuals and these strange things going on. And people were just not open to this movie when it came out. And I feel as if Tarsem's career would be so much bigger today. You release this exact same movie in the 2020s, you slap a neon films logo before the beginning of it, and you maybe clean up some of the more dated elements, and this movie would be a hit nowadays. If you
Hmm.
would just This would be such a huge movie with, film lovers and with film buffs and people who like to dissect films. It would have been huge, but unfortunately it was, released in 1999.
In 1999, in English by a Hollywood studio. And I think with the Del Toro comparison, it's funny, but because you would think that the being often a foreign film director, or at least writing a lot of Spanish language films, that would hold him back. But I think it granted him more credibility than Tarsem received, because Tarsem, of course, came out of directing music videos and commercials and stuff like that, boutique projects. And this was his first stab at filmmaking. And God, because it is slept on. You're absolutely right. And like even I personally slept on it because my frame of reference was sitting in a hotel room, channel surfing, and stopping there for a little bit and not understanding what the fuck is going on. Because if this has a plot, it's basically like, what if Silence of the Lambs involved jumping into like what's like a Mindscape movie? I can't think of one, but it's a simple mashing of premises, but it becomes so much more than that. Like once all the wild imagery starts popping up and the logic of the dream world starts playing itself out, everything just gets really elevated after a while, and it becomes so much more than the hokiness of the premise, because all of the FBI people are just weighing this fucking movie down. Even Vince Vaughn is just kind of a dead weight. But the fact that this movie is starring someone like Jennifer Lopez, like you would think that would make it a big deal that something this radical and subversive would be made by the Hollywood system, and at the same time star someone who basically was she was a true movie star at this point. This was a star, and a pop star,
the biggest pop star in the world.
Yep. And so like, and of course people weren't really taking her seriously. But despite this coming after, Out of Sight, and like I think another and Selena, obviously, like she had proven that she was a good actress, and maybe not that she was a draw. And I think that's maybe the reason why we don't see her in too many movies these days.
Yeah, she's like, you can tell that she actually tried to challenge herself for once with this role, because it's so like, she's so soft spoken in this role, and she's very like motherly almost is the way I would describe it. And it's just not the type of role that you would think the largest pop star on the planet would choose at the time. And it's a strangely understated role for someone like that, before she like before she resigned herself to doing nothing but rom-coms and like bad action films after this. You could tell that she was actually trying with something like this, and it makes for an interesting like juxtaposition between her character and then like her in the real world, like the real world Jennifer Lopez. And I really enjoyed her for the most part. And to go back to your point about the FBI agents, that is definitely the part of this movie that doesn't hold up. It's all the FBI agent stuff that it plays to me like diet soda version of David Fincher, basically, where those parts of the movie want to be Seven, basically.
And in the hands of, and maybe I don't know what would have, if the director was the problem there, or if it was the studio just looking for something more conventional to balance out the darkness and the surrealness of everything else. Because they make the real world so like TV boring. It's like a bad episode of CSI, when they're in the real world. But once you get into the lab, it's really fun.
Yeah, I think honestly, what it probably was the writer. I think his name is Mark Protosevich, and this guy really like doesn't do the movie any favors. He's written. Mark Protosevich has only written, I think, like 6 movies in his entire career, and he wrote I Am Legend. He wrote the first Thor movie. He wrote the remake of Old Boy, the English remake of Old Boy.
No, fuck this guy. He's a hack.
Yeah.
Well, but he popped out a kind of a good movie here, or at least Tarsem was able to make something work in spite of him, because, oh god, once you start seeing like the Emperor version of the villain, it's just like, oh fuck, like that's one of the most terrifying visuals ever, and that's what haunted my dreams as a child. Was seeing that kind of thing, because you're just channel surfing looking for cartoons, and all of a sudden you have to look at Vincent D'Onofrio in that getup, and it's just nightmare fuel.
Yeah, he's great. Yeah, to speak on that for a second, Vincent D'Onofrio, as I guess sort of the second lead of the film, is he was in such a weird place when this movie came out, because in some scenes they do such a good job of in like the real world scenes making him seem like frail and like small and like almost impish, and then in the dream world he looks like buff and like huge and domineering, and it's crazy how they were able to do that with, I don't know if he like actually put on a bunch of muscle and then they filmed all those scenes, you know, at the end, or what they did to do that, but they did a really good job at making him seem really, really scary.
God, yeah, he does just have an aura, you know, like when he's, you know, playing that version of the character. But at the same time, with like, and this is a unique thing about this movie, is that like they obviously set his character up, is it Starger? Is that how you say his name? Starger.
Yeah.
As like a fucking despicable monster. You know, he's dropping women into glass enclosures and like watching them slowly drown from afar just for the fun of watching them suffer. But then they make you care about him and feel bad for him, you know, because he's able to be vulnerable and sympathetic, you know, in terms of, you know, exploring his origins, I guess. And that was, you know, pretty, you know, delicately done. I don't know. And from I get the sense that critics of the time didn't buy it. But like you kind of said earlier, this movie was ahead of the curve to such an extent that people just thought it was a joke, when it should have been taken as a really moving, you know, kind of experience for what it is, and kind of transcendent for what is just a serial killer movie on its surface. It does so much more with it. Instead of just making Hannibal Lecter like charisma, you know, carry the character, it's like it's feeling bad for someone who's evil.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was one of the main complaints about the movie when it came out, was that, you know, some people found it absolutely appalling because the movie was trying to make you empathize with a serial killer, and not a fun serial killer.
No.
And yeah, it's I don't know. I think that it's doable because they very specifically used the little kid version of the character in those scenes. You know, when he was a boy, and they use that child actor, and I don't know, I just think that you have to kind of separate that yourself, like do the work yourself to be able to separate, like, okay, this is when he was a child and this is before he became like completely corrupted, and so, you know, that version of this character is still able to be saved, and that's kind of what happens at the end. Is, you know, she sort of, you know, it's none of it's real, of course. It's all just kind of in the mind, but she sort of saves him, the little kid version of his brain, or of his like personality,
his innocence. It's like what is left of his innate goodness that every person has. You know, it's the reason why the Pope, you know, like would visit the guy that tried to kill him up until the moment he was executed. You know, it's that kind of grace, I guess. And yeah, that's a hard thing to understand, because there's a certain reprehensibility that is unforgivable to most. But there's always exceptions. You know, there's people who are willing to make that exception, I suppose. And
yeah. Oh, go ahead.
No, I really have.
Well, I was just gonna say, like,
take the lead.
One of the things that I noticed between like the TV, when I was watching this movie, you know, unedited here for the first time, one of the things, like when I first knew, like, oh boy, like this movie is not nearly as like tame as I thought it was because I'm pretty sure they cut the entire scene from the film when he suspends himself and then like jerks off over the girl's body.
Yeah.
That scene doesn't even exist in the TV edits of this movie, because it's so like just disgustingly gross. And so like when I was watching, I'm like, oh my god, I don't even remember this scene at all, because it's not even in the TV versions of this movie. And so yeah, I just wanted to point that out again. And while we're on that subject, what imagery stands out to you the most from this movie, as far as like the surrealist imagery and sort of what it means to the film, or what you think he's trying to say? What stood out to you the most?
Golly, well, it's hard to unpack, because I'm gonna have to be like watching this a little bit, because it's kind of a blur when I now that I, even though it should be fresher in my mind, but all the stuff with the horse, like where it's all the day, like I was just trying to pick out all the little moments where I was like, oh, he's ripping off this guy. There's Alex, what's his face, like the guy with the he does like that kind of like splitting of the horse type of thing. What's his name? Damien Hirst. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I spent a lot of time trying to poke out the influences and be like, ooh, so like he's borrowing it from this person, and what was the intent behind that? And this movie's kind of inscrutable to me. A lot of this is hard to suss out, except for like having the incarnations of his mother sitting in that field with like their mouths tilted back, just kind of belittling him from afar. I don't know, like that was bizarre. But just, yeah, like all this shit, like with the dolled up victims, that is stuff I don't remember seeing when I watched this on TV. And that really fucked me up.
Yeah.
Like
how they're like bleached. He like soaks them in bleach, and yeah, it's pretty messed up. And I mean all that stuff too.
The little boy, the Edward, like the kid that she's like trying to get out of a coma, whenever his like evil boogeyman manifestation would appear, I like jumped. Like that was really well done, even though it was the most fuzzy effect ever. Like looking back on it, there's a lot of datedness to these effects, but the production design here is out of this world, even when they're just using leftover pieces from, Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula movie. Because is that literally what that lady did? She just took Dracula's armor and just put it on these people? Was that a deliberate choice? Is that just a reference?
I think it's probably just her style, because that the Japanese costume designer, her name's Aiko Ishioka, and she's kind of known for that style, like the weird like ridges everywhere, how like everything is ribbed, and it definitely, I mean, it's definitely the most blatant there when she uses the VR suits are the exact same thing as Dracula's armor from the 1992 Dracula. And so yeah, she is ripping off of herself a bit there, but she did all the other costumes too.
Yeah, like look at that fucking thing. Like this is just amazing. And it what is he exposing? He's like I don't know, like you could just like sit here and unpack all of it, and I'm surprised that it doesn't. Do a lot of people talk about this movie today, or is it still kind of like disregarded by most?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because yes, it is. In preparations for these retrospectives, I try and go out there and sort of collect people's, try and figure out what people thought of the film at the time it came out, and what people think of it now, and just how people have analyzed it over the years. And this movie, out of any of the retrospectives we've ever done, this movie has so little out there as far as like analysis and even just like reviews, like just people doing reviews. Like I think the most notable thing it has is a 15-minute review from the Nostalgia Critic on his YouTube channel, and that's it. I mean, there's just not a lot out there, and it goes back to what we were saying about this movie sort of being a little bit forgotten about, a little bit tossed off as like not as good as the rest of his filmography, I guess, or not as good as The Fall, and not as good as Immortals. And
I don't think you can say that. I can't say that after like seeing it, for this show, that my esteem for this movie rose really, really high, almost to the point where I would almost like, there's an argument that this is his best movie. You could almost say that.
You could, yeah. You definitely think you could, and Yeah, it's just there's not a lot of people out there talking about it. And Tarsem in general, he's such a I had, texted you before the show that he's such an enigmatic guy because he doesn't do a lot of interviews, and the interviews, he's a good interviewer. In the couple that are out there, he's really playful with the interviewers a lot of the time, and he says a lot of really really insightful stuff, but he's just, there's not a lot of info about the guy. His Wikipedia page is like 2 paragraphs long, and his, nobody's done like an inside the actor's studio with him, or inside, or any sort of profile on the guy or anything like that. It's just like he's just kind of there, and yeah, it's just interesting that nobody's taken an interest in this guy to do something like that. But
because he did kind of introduce certain aspects of Bollywood grammar to Western audiences, the use of slow-mo and just like in color, like
the colors,
like most Hollywood movies did not pop like this movie does. And that's something you can say about pretty much everything he's made, like except maybe Immortals. Immortals was a little drab. It was really committed to that bronzed look, but we'll talk about that at another date, possibly. But yeah, he deserves a reappraisal. People should come back to this because it kind of did all the walking, so other movies could run. And like if we wouldn't have Florence Pugh if J-Lo hadn't taken a chance on a movie like this. But at the same time, this wasn't an independent feature, but it would kind of seem like the direction it would take today. Like a boutique studio would have been the ones to make this today, and it maybe would have had a little more, more refinement to it as a consequence. But like, what if like does this deserve a proper remake? Would that be interesting in like a Suspiria kind of way? Like, would that be a unique challenge for an up and coming filmmaker? Would that even be worth the effort? Probably not, because we're the only Tarsem stands that are out there apparently.
Well, I mean, like I said earlier, I do think this would go over a lot better today with, like, I mean, probably not with general audiences, but I just mean sort of with like film buffs and people who like to analyze films. But here's the sort of proper problem with that is that, and this is something, I think we'll probably touch on in a number of times as we talk about him, is that people often say that Tarsem is sort of style over substance, and people often say that he sort of is a rip-off artist where he'll take a little bit from over here and a little bit from over here and just kind of make something up of it. And so, you almost wonder if to try and remake this movie would be like, I don't know if you'd get a different result, because this movie is very much like an amalgamation of a bunch of other people's things, where, we had talked about earlier how, there's a bit of Damien Hirst in there. There's Salvador Dali, there's H.R. Geiger. And then I think the most notable point of comparison, because he's an actual filmmaker, is the 1960s Armenian director Sergei Parajanov, who Tarsem has been accused of sort of stealing his style from whole cloth in the past. And so, you wonder if this movie were to be remade, if you wouldn't just get the same result again, because it's such an amalgam of other people's things. And I don't know, what do you think of that idea? And what do you think of the idea of him sort of being a rip-off artist?
And maybe that kind of answers the overarching question about why he isn't talked about more and why he isn't regarded. People kind of discount the final product because they feel like it's not honestly come by. But then they love hip-hop. And I guess that's the criticism I would make, of that critique. My apologetics for Tarsem, if you will, is that yeah, it might be him playing with a bunch of other people's things, but that's pretty much what Hollywood is these days. It's just adaptations. It's taking other people's stuff and doing your own thing with it so that you own it. And in that regard, I think he succeeds because while you might be able to recognize like where like a lot of this is coming from, it doesn't like certain aspects definitely have the air of holy shit, this just came right out of someone's nightmare fueled mind and now it's on my screen. But there are just as many things where you're like, okay, yeah, this is the Giger thing. This is the this is where he was ripping off Dolly or being inspired by a specific painting. Because there are like I flashed some images up a little earlier that are some egregious examples of that, like with like the Armenian director in particular, and you just kind of have to also acknowledge that who else fucking does that? George Lucas does, and he's like one of the most successful filmmakers who's ever lived and ever done it. You look at what he lifts from other things. Look at Quentin Tarantino. That's all that guy does. And I think it's kind of disingenuous to discount him as a hack or a ripoff artist when all these others, even though to be fair, these other filmmakers are also called hacks and ripoff artists for doing it too. I just think that he should be given more of a fair shake.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think often when people make that criticism, they make it because there's nothing else to really criticize the person for. So it's almost like a fallback criticism, like, oh,
Yeah.
there's nothing else I can criticize, so let me just go and find all of the shit that this person was inspired by and then call them, a ripoff artist. And yeah, you make a good point. It's, everybody does it pretty much in Hollywood. And the more interesting thing about Tarsem is that he is doing it from sources that don't often get like inspiration from. Like there's plenty, like you mentioned George Lucas earlier, and one of the things George Lucas is famous for sort of cribbing from is like Flash Gordon. But the thing is, so many other directors took from Flash Gordon, but Tarsem, he is pulling, Tarsem's pulling
true.
from sources. Yeah, Tarsem's pulling from sources that don't often get pulled from. So in that way, I think just in general, it's more interesting because it's like nobody else is doing these things. Nobody else is taking from these sources that, everybody else, Flash Gordon is so ripped off, but yeah, it's I think a lot, the critics have it wrong on this one. I just want to say, just definitively, like I put in our document, this movie has a 45% critical consensus on Rotten Tomatoes, and it has a 40 out of 100 rating on Metacritic, and it's just criminal. I think it's like it's way too low, and I was reading reviews. One thing I did want to call out was there is a really fun time capsule review from LA Weekly that was written when the movie came out from Manola Dargis wrote it. And you can't even read the review anymore because I'm pretty sure it's like it's really chauvinistic. But the review byline is Jennifer Lopez's butt. Alas, the moment is over too soon. The movie, sadly, is not.
Oh, what a hacky little subhead right there. Oh my god.
Yeah. So it's funny. You can't even find that review anymore online. They just removed it from the internet completely because I'm pretty sure it's just like super, talking about how hot Jennifer Lopez is and how nice her ass looks and stuff like that. And so they're just like, nope. Get rid of it.
Jesus, yeah, that's a big yikes. And I think for Dargis's probably like future career, if he still has one, it was probably like, yeah, can we like memory hole that? Like I don't want to get canceled.
Yeah.
But what should get canceled apparently is the 2009 straight-to-video sequel this movie had. Why the fuck does that exist?
Yeah, I mean I'm pretty sure it's just a cash grab. Like nobody. So if people don't know, this movie got a straight to DVD sequel called The Cell 2, and nobody involved with this first film is involved with that movie, and it is just straight up a cash grab, and it's from what I haven't seen it, but from what I understand, it's pretty awful.
It's kind of like the Rage Carrie 2. That was also an unfortunate unnecessary horror sequel that I ran into over the years. But as far as, Tarsem is concerned, I think we all were put on notice when this movie came out that there was a big swinging dick on the block, even though the movie underperformed and he got kind of savaged critically. But it obviously struck a chord enough because this thing was on heavy rotation on like Sci-Fi or like TNT, like USA, like those kinds of basic cable networks loved to show this. And that is how both of us consumed it for most of our lives, apparently. But it goes without saying, this is like Blu-ray worthy. I'm curious, like, what its availability is like on that front, and if there's anything like. I want Criterion. Is he on the Criterion Collection, Tarsem? Because he should be.
I don't think so. No, because another thing we'll probably talk about more in the future is how hard it is to get a hold of his movies, because The Fall is really hard to get. This movie is really hard to get. You can only get them secondhand. The only one that really is widely available, I think, is Immortals, because it was probably his biggest, hit, his biggest commercial hit. And so, yeah, it's inexplicably hard to get a hold of his films.
Well, we're going to have to do some digging, get some explanations. Moving on to the Mentionables. It's pretty heavy this week. This is kind of a big deal, because I've been playing with getting these Infinity Engine, CRPGs to work on my Steam Deck, and Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 are some of them, because I want to be ready and for my Steam Deck to be able to handle this game. What is it like playing Baldur's Gate 3, Matt?
Yeah, it's great. This is a long time coming. I think this game has been in early access for about 3 years, and it was very, very hard for me to not jump in when it was in early access to start playing it. I held off, and I haven't played any of it until it got its 1.0 release last week. And yeah, I'm really enjoying it. I'm a big fan of Larian Studios, the company that made this. All of their Divinity games I have played and, spent countless hours. I think I put like 80 hours each into Divinity Original Sin 1 and 2.
Damn.
And I envision that happening here too, because I spent about 2 hours in the character creator until I was finally satisfied with what I had created. I was finally like, okay, this is, it's so in depth. I mean, if people don't know, this is essentially a video game version of D&D. Like, this is probably the best like one-to-one adaptation we have gotten so far of actually playing a game of D&D as a video game.
Wow.
And really looking forward to sinking more time into it. From what I understand, it is like 100-hour game, so we will see.
Yeah, because it's like 150 gigabytes in install size or something like that. That might be exaggerating slightly, but your comment about 2 hours of character creation just made me really envious, because I've been loading my deck up with my favorite RPGs, but they're most like from Bethesda or BioWare, and what I'm struck by is just how little time I spend in character creation. I just don't give a shit about it, because it's just so piss poor in some of those games. But I played a game, Tyranny, that's really fun. That's kind of along those lines too, but maybe not as in depth as this. Just because I need to get the experience, because I am holding off to buy this until I know that the deck can properly handle it. Because let me tell you, it's a boondoggle. It still is a boondoggle. But the thing is, you just don't know that the solution has been found like a year ago, and it's just not in front of you. Because getting all these different launchers to work with Linux is a nightmare. But there's really smart people who are doing the hard work for me. So I am now able to have the EA Games launcher installed on my Steam Deck, and I can finally play the the free version. I got this for free just from some like Amazon giveaway, but the legendary version of the Mass Effect trilogy, and I am just reminded by how boring that first game is. Because I'm playing through this first game, I'm on the Citadel, I'm getting the ball rolling on the story so I can start planet hopping, but I just don't give a shit about who my shepherd is, so I just went with base model. I'm reminded that, oh, things are different in 1 versus 2. That's annoying. And then I remember, oh, I can just skip this fucking game and just play 2. So that's not what I am doing. Because Mass Effect 2, as we all know, is the real one. That's the great one. And I'm just getting started on that. But half the battle is just getting these things working. But once it works, it's amazing. That's something that is not supposed to effectively work on the hardware or the software I have is able to work as flawlessly as this does with as little headache once you actually just hit play. But getting from that point is a headache. So yeah, maybe just go with an ROG Ally instead if you're venturing into mobile gaming, because oh god, if you're playing outside of the Steam sandbox, you're getting fucked up the butt. And it, like, I have all those Amazon games and I can't even play them because the launcher doesn't work anymore. So what am I supposed to do? I guess
let me ask you this.
Do other things.
What, just real quick here, in Mass Effect 2, what's your squad are you running with? Who do you run with?
God, I need to get them together, but my favorite grouping, because like I would try out different teams on the final run, once I had everything maxed out just for the fun of it. And I'm gonna have to look up the names of some of these characters. Thane Krios, Thane, yep. And the Geth, what's his name, Legion. Yeah, Legion. Yep. Yeah, those two, because they both are just these snipers with, like, one has biotics and and the other has the tech skill tree, or it's Garrison Grunt. It's those two. It's like I didn't often roll with anybody else but those guys because I just loved how powerful they all were. I didn't play enough with. I didn't once use the old guy with a white eyeball. Never used that guy. But
is that Zaid?
Zaid, yeah. I never really used him. But who was your go-to?
Well, I usually ran Thane, and then I would kind of swap out the other person. I mean, I was kind of a Liara guy in the first game, so I really liked her. I mean, I think Liara has like the best arc in those games. Like, have you ever played the Shadow Broker DLC?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. Her arc is awesome, and so I would typically do like a Liara / Thane / sometimes Miranda.
Yeah. It just kind of depends on what stage of the game you're at. But that's what that was like the fun of that game though, is like, getting the different squad set up and then finding some way to like exploit, the situation to, do the best. Because let me tell you, the first time I did that suicide mission, my hands just sweated bullets the whole time. And that's what I'm running for. Like, and that's why that game is so powerful for me. Why I still have it. Why I have a PlayStation 3 copy of it for absolutely no reason. But that was the theater and stream for you this week. We're going to continue our retrospective on Tarsem with this was his follow-up to The Cell, correct?
It was, yep.
Yep, The Fall. The inscrutable little fairy tale, the beautiful, wondrous little movie that truly opened my eyes to what Kino was. Like we'll get to that though. I'm so looking forward to this. And once again, and I have to thank you for owning a copy of it, because otherwise, it's going to be kind of hard for anybody else out there to watch this for themselves, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a pretty hard one to find. So yeah, with this one, it's pretty much. You gotta have a physical copy, or you gotta, troll the dark waters of the pirate web to get this one.
I'm sure it's out there, but do yourself a favor and maybe kick some money to whoever owns the rights to this, so they get the hint and release it more widely. And the same with The Cell. But as far as that goes, see you next week, everyone, and take care.
Yep. See ya.